Hello again, Lyndall here with the Marshfield Old School Times, coming to you from a beautiful Saturday afternoon here in October or November now, November the 2nd. Want to introduce our special guest today, the Honorable Circuit Judge, Chuck Replogle.
Yep.
Chuck,
Thanks for having me.
thanks for coming on. That
Yeah.
sounds has pretty good ring to it,
Well,
doesn't
yeah, I kind of like it. I'm trying to get used to it. So
it? You've been the Circuit Judge 2 days,
yeah,
so that's great. Well, we're going to talk a lot about that, and we're very proud of Chuck and what he's been able to do in his young career. So, but before we do that, we want to thank Logan Fraker over here, our producer again, and I want to also mention our theme song, Dennis Beck's "Time Flies." I think maybe your aunt might have performed on that song. You never know.
maybe so.
She performed in the James River Band with Dennis and several folks many years ago, and then even more recently, and they did some recordings. So we'll talk maybe a minute about that as well. So, Chuck, what we like to do on this show, and you've probably watched some segments, but we always like to start at the beginning. And as one of our famous guests, Gary Price, said, when did you come to America?
Oh, when did I come, or when did the family come?
No,
I came.
That means when were you born?
I came in 1976.
There you go.
So,
There you go. There you go.
So doesn't feel like all that long ago, but it's starting to add up there.
Yes, it is.
So
Yes.
1976.
We'll talk a little bit about your family, your mom and dad, and you come from two very well-known Webster County families, and I think it's great to know a little bit of background about our guests because there's lots of connections, especially in smaller communities like we are, and even you and I are a little related back there. So,
Yeah.
talk just for a minute about when you came to Marshfield or the planet, I guess is how Gary would say it, when you came and your family and your mom and
Yeah.
dad and stuff.
Yeah. Well, my dad is Dave, and my mom's Janie, and I was born and raised in Marshfield, and I grew up in a good, loving home. My parents have always been really supportive of me uh, the whole time, and so yeah, I just kind of grew up with a strong sense of family. They came from bigger size families, and so family was important, and they really instilled that in me, and so yeah.
You have one sister.
One sister, Casey. Yes, yeah, she's living over in Fairgrove right now.
So both of you went to school at Marshfield. You graduated
1994.
1994.
Yeah.
That was Casey a little younger than you?
Yes, she graduated in 2002.
Yeah. Okay. Great family, the Replogle family, and then your mother was a Day.
That's correct.
Both, again, large Webster County families. And for those of you that might be curious, probably not too many of you, but some of you might be. I think Chuck's great-grandmother and my great-grandmother, I believe, were sisters. They were Biggers.
Yeah.
Pearl Replogle was a Biggers, and Calla Roast was a Biggers. So, of course, my mother was a Roast, so that was the connection. So,
yeah.
And again, there's lots of those connections out, but it's kind of fun to sometimes put that together.
Right. Yeah.
When you're in the history business, like we are, we're here because we want to document history. We want to make sure that down the road, when we're gone, or maybe hopefully before we're gone, our kids and grandkids would like to know a little bit more about Webster County and Marshfield and our role in those communities. And so that's why we do this, and we're having a lot of fun with it. So growing up in Marshfield, tell us a little bit about what you did. I know you were a pretty good athlete, played probably several sports, but I'm sure you played Little League Baseball, Mab Baseball in those days, and may have had some friends, or you may have rode your bike around the square. Tell us a little bit about growing up in Marshfield.
Well, looking back on it, those were pretty special times. Like you said, we used to get on our bike on a summer day and ride all over town and come back at night, and everything was just fine. And so we had a good time, had lots of friends. When I was growing up, sports was a really big thing. And they did let me play on several teams. I don't know that I was a great athlete or anything, but they did let me be on some teams. But even from from an early age, sports had always been big in the families, and particularly on the Replogle side. And so I grew up playing baseball and basketball primarily, and those MAP days were fun, playing t-ball and graduating up to pitching machine, and then to little league and pony league, and so we did a lot of that, and even outside of um, the formal uh, structured leagues that we played in. I mean, we just played a lot of ball.
Yeah.
There's basketball hoops all over town, and you get people together and you play a pickup game, or maybe you can't play a informal game of baseball, but maybe you go out somewhere and play some stickball or hit some rocks or something, and just had a lot of fun. And I really have a lot of good memories of being a kid. Really, really valuable to me.
Yeah. And you know, those days and those activities for a young person, and I was able to experience that as well. I wasn't as good an athlete as you were, and your uncles,
Yeah.
but and your dad,
Mhm.
but certainly they do help mold who we become, and the things that we learn on the basketball court, whether it's in school or whether it's in the parking lot. A lot of those things carry us through life,
Yeah.
I think, and so it's really important.
Mhm.
Speaking of your uncles, Ron Replogle was the former colonel of the Missouri Highway Patrol. Just a great person and great family. Fortunately, I got to serve in the Missouri House when Ron was still the colonel, and we certainly good friends. And then your other uncle Roger and I grew up together and shared an apartment during college. And Roger's in California and with the Federal Reserve and is done extremely well.
Mhm.
And then your dad, a great basketball player here in this gym in this building.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this last week on our history show, how the impact of that gymnasium when you walked in as a kid. And unfortunately, you weren't born yet, so you don't remember this when your dad played.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. The sound, the music, the jazz band, the popcorn, the smell,
Mhm.
the stands just packed with people. And the humidity, the windows would steam over. There were so many people in there, but in a cold winter night. But
Mhm.
it was amazing, and Dave was a phenomenal basketball player.
Yeah.
In those days.
Yeah. We had some pretty good battles on the driveway basketball goal, the basketball court, the Replogle basketball court when I was growing up, and he would never admit it. Whenever I'd be able to beat him,
Yeah,
yeah, he was a pretty good athlete.
he sure was.
Mhm.
Um, so graduating in '94, and then you moved on, went to college. Talk a
Mhm.
little bit about those college years.
Yeah. So I went to undergraduate at Missouri Southern, and whenever I was a senior in high school, I started reading John Grisham books, and that really got me interested in the FBI. That was really what I wanted to do when I left Marshfield, is I wanted to be an FBI agent. And so I wasn't quite sure what I needed to do to get there. So I went to Missouri Southern, and I was a criminal justice major there. And one of the reasons that I chose to go there was I played baseball in addition to basketball in high school, and they let me walk on the baseball team there at Missouri Southern. It's a Division II program, and never played there. Basically, they let me practice with them and shag fly balls. But that's where I went to college in Joplin, and those were a good 4 years. I was there from 1994 to 1998, and then graduated with a criminal justice degree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's criminal justice. Okay,
Mhm.
and then went on to law school.
Yep. The next step was law school, and when I went to college, that really wasn't on my radar. Like I mentioned, I was really interested in being an FBI agent, and so I was curious about that particular career field. So I would track people down and talk to them, and I spoke to some FBI agents, and kind of talking about the career and what it takes to break in, and I'm a little bit colorblind, and I had some agents tell me that I would never get in. I'd never be selected to get into the FBI because of that.
Hmm.
And so, um, when I was in college, there were multiple tracks to get into the FBI. You could have 3 years of law enforcement experience. You could be an accountant, or you could go to law school. And so I kind of started gravitating as the way to get into the FBI was to go through law school, and whenever I found out that I probably wouldn't get into the FBI, whether it was true or not, I don't know. But at the time, I was pretty devastated.
Really?
But I decided I would just go ahead, and I was thinking about going to law school, so I'd go ahead and follow that track, and took my LSAT, and was fortunate to get accepted to a few different schools. But I went to the University of Tulsa College of Law, and the reason that I went there was I had a friend in college who had graduated a year earlier than I did, and he went to law school at Tulsa. And so having a friend that was already there, a roommate, somebody who knew the ropes, knew what I could help me prepare for what I needed to be prepared for, that was pretty valuable to me. So I chose to go to the University of Tulsa, and I was there from 1998 until I graduated in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Tulsa's a great city.
Yeah, yeah, I bet it was. Any notable people that you might have went to school with or graduated with? Sometimes it's interesting. People will say, "Oh yeah, I graduated with so and so," or whatever. Yeah. Country music star or another famous attorney or anything like that.
I don't know if anybody's made is notorious or not. Rich Abishan, you may know him.
I know Rich. Yeah.
Rich graduated with me, and I've got a funny story about him. We were friends from the get-go, and
we should mention that Rich is in Jeff City. He's an attorney in Jeff City, and let's see, I can't remember exactly. Is he with a lobbying firm now?
He has his own firm, and he's a lobbyist in addition to a normal practice.
Really good person.
Yeah.
And then is it his wife that's in the Supreme Court, or is that his relative? I think
it was his wife.
I'm not sure if it's good. There's a connection there.
Yeah.
Betsy.
Yeah. But anyways, Rich was always a confident fella, smart guy too, very smart, very sharp, and
he'll probably be watching. So
probably I'm gonna
he'll owe you a couple bucks for this.
Probably so. But anyways, I was the opposite. Like I was scared to death when I went to law school. And when you're in law school, the teachers, the way they teach is that they assign you readings, and then whenever you come to class, then you have to be prepared to answer questions from the professor. And so they'll just randomly call on students, and they'll say, talk about this case that you read, and then you have to kind of talk about it, and they'll ask you tough questions, and it's kind of a terrifying experience for most students. So anyways, we sat in the back row in our contracts class, first year contracts. Rich is the confident new law student, and I'm the terrified person. And it's stadium seating, and so we're in the back at the top. And our contracts teacher, her name was Winona Tanaka. She was about a 4'11" Hawaiian lady. Probably didn't weigh more than 100 pounds, and she was mean. Everybody was afraid of her. I was terrified of her. But anyways, we walk in, and she says, "Okay, let's talk about what we read." And she's down, at the base of the auditorium, and there's probably 35, 50 people in there, students. And so she would be walking around kind of eyeing who she's going to pick on that day. And I'm trying to slump down to where the person in front, I'm behind the person in front of me, she can't see me. And Rich likes to play games with her. And as soon as she would kind of turn away to where we were in her peripheral vision, he'd raise his hand enough for her to see the motion, and she would look up at there, and then he'd put it down, and I'm like, Rich, stop, because I thought he was going to get me called on. But he would always, when she called on him, he did just fine. And then whenever she would call on me, I'd just be a stammering mess, But, he caused me a lot of emotional trauma that year. I think, so.
Great story, and that's why we ask you those questions. Like, did you go serve with anybody that we? And it always jogs that part of your memory.
Yeah,
so, good deal. So you graduated from there in '98, right?
2001.
I'm sorry, 2001. Yeah, that's right, because you had your undergrad. Then, what was your first job?
My first job was at a law firm in Springfield, then known as William H. McDonald and Associates.
Yes.
Bill McDonald was one of the partners there, and the
Marshfield guy.
namesake, Marshfield
Uh-huh.
guy, and a guy who had made quite the name for himself as a trial attorney
Yeah.
back in the 70s and 80s
Mhm.
and 90s, and was still going strong when I was there. And he was one of multiple partners. Another partner there was Craig Hosmer,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
another Marshfield guy, and
My classmate.
yeah, terrific attorney.
Uh-huh.
But anyways, I went there. That was my first job out of law school, and it was a good job. And I really appreciated the time that I had with those guys because they really taught me how to practice law, how to try a case, um, and a lot of places that you go, particularly if it's a larger firm, they'll make you go to the library and do the research
Mhm.
and kind of do the things that aren't fun. But those guys really turned me loose and let me do what I want. And some of those guys had some big cases, and
Yeah.
they let me tag along with them and help them with their cases as well as doing my own cases.
Sure.
And one of the partners there, his name was Stuart King, heck of a trial attorney.
Mhm.
And I really worked with him quite a bit and worked with Craig quite a bit and just learned a lot of things. It was
Right.
a valuable experience. So I worked there from 2001 until 2006 and worked on some big cases. They had some big cases. They had some multi-million-dollar cases that came
Yeah.
in, and I got to work on some of those. So it's
Sure.
pretty neat.
You bet.
Mhm.
Things were changing in the corporate world and the climate with after 9/11.
Yeah.
I know all of the new Homeland Security stuff was coming in. The cities and the count, everybody had to start revamping their way of doing things because of the Homeland Security Act,
Yeah.
which took effect after 9/11. So kind of a changing world, and of course, we all know that during those George W. Bush years, the first part was pretty good, and then we got into a little battle overseas, and
Yeah.
things started changing again there as
Right.
well.
Right.
And then by '08, guess what happened? Ooh,
Yep.
the greatest recession since the Great Depression.
Right.
So kind of challenging times when you get your start.
Yep.
So Bill McDonald married Miss Missouri.
Mhm.
Bill was a Marshfield guy, and Janice Robinson. I'm doing this for historic purposes. Janice Robinson, Marshfield grad, and she went on and became Miss Missouri, which I'm very confident was the only girl from Marshfield that ever made Miss Missouri. So, and that's another claim to fame for Bill.
Yeah.
So how about let's kind of move into your family. You
Mhm.
met your bride then somewhere in that era, probably, didn't you?
I did. My wife Tiffany I met her in Tulsa. She's a Tulsa native, and we met there and hit it off uh, from the get go, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
She was at the time she was going to school at the University of Oklahoma, is where she was going, and the night we met, it was just by happenstance. Some of my friends were having a gathering of friends, I guess I would say, at somebody's house, and the night that was on a Saturday night, and the night before, those guys that were playing the hosts had seen some pretty girls and had invited them to this gathering, and as Tiffany tells me, they had other plans for the next night, but those plans ended up falling through, and so they thought, we got invited to, let's go see what that's all about.
Yeah.
And so and I was there whenever they happened to show up, and was just taken back by how pretty she was.
Yeah,
And so
that's a pretty neat story.
yeah, we hit it off, and I eventually worked up the courage to ask her for her phone number, and she gave it to me.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a really cool story.
So
That reminds me of that Mayberry episode where the Mount Pilot girls, they're in the cafe there, and Barn and Andy are, hey, the Mount Pilot girls, and they start flirting with them, and kind of one of those deals.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you obviously had some children come along then. And
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about your kids.
Yep. So the oldest is my stepson Cole,
Uh-huh.
and he was 2 whenever Tiffany and I met. And so we dated for about 3 years and before we got married, and so Cole, kind of grew up with us and
Sure.
with me, um, and so Cole is he's off in Kansas City right now, and then I have two daughters, Lauren and Emily, and Lauren is a freshman at Mizzou this year, and Emily is a freshman at Marshfield High School.
Yeah.
So
And Lawrence, she's kind of making a little name for herself up there in the journalist world, isn't she?
yeah, she is
Journalism.
she is interested in
Yeah.
journalism, and she's a neat kid. She's really smart, really creative, and she's just very good communicator. Her ability to speak, even when she was a young girl, to stand up in front of a bunch of adults and be able to speak clearly, and it was pretty impressive. And her ability to write, she's a very good writer, and so she is interested in journalism.
Uh-huh.
And her junior year in high school, we started talking about where she might go to college, and I said, Mizzou is really known for being
Oh,
a
yeah.
good journalism school,
Yeah.
and you ought to consider going there. And so we went on a tour, and she was just blown away by it,
Yeah.
and so chose to go there. And after she graduated from high school in the spring of this year, Dan Weimer with the Webster County Citizen gave her let her work there over the summer, and
Yeah.
he really turned her loose. I mean, she was not getting coffee for him or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, from the get go, he said, "Here's some stories you may want to go research."
That's
and
really cool.
and
Yeah.
she would go off and interview people and write stories from day one. And she really had a good experience with that and enjoyed
Awesome.
it. And so now she's up there, and she is working for the student-run publication, The Maneater.
Hmm.
That's a digital magazine for the University of Missouri, and she's got I think one article out, getting ready to have another one out. She does a lot of the graphics for them, but she's
That's awesome.
she's loving life up
And
there.
if you go to, I think, Chuck and probably Tiffany's Facebook, you can read that article, right? I think I
Yeah,
just saw it came out in the last few days. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
if you're interested in checking out Lauren's work, that'd be a great thing to do.
yep.
Um, so you get back, you get your family going, and then when did you start your private practice then?
Yeah, so the private practice, like I said, the first 5 years were
Uh-huh.
at the law firm in Springfield,
Yeah.
and while I was up there, we had a satellite office here in Marshfield. Whenever Ken Thompson went to the bench in 2001,
Hmm.
um, he was the last. That was Hamesworth, Sims, and Thompson, and Bill Sims had gone to the bench, and he'd been elected in 2000, and then in 2001, Ken had been appointed because of the census that year, put us over the population of where we were going to have two associate circuit
Right.
judges. So he got appointed to fill that new spot. And about that time, the firm that I was at, they bought that building, bought the practice, so to speak, and kind of operated as a satellite office. Well, me being from Marshfield, I spent a lot of time there just because of obviously my connection with the community, and really started to develop a good client base up there. And in 2006, Don Cheever had been in the private practice of law, and he was running for judge.
Hmm.
He was elected, and me and another attorney there at the firm, Ben Bergstresser,
Uh-huh.
we had decided that might be a pretty good business opportunity for us to kind of go start our own thing up there. And so we bought Don's building after he was elected, and opened up shop, and it was just gangbusters from the get go. And so we had let's see, 12 good years there.
Yeah.
A lot of business activity.
So up until what, about 18 then?
Yeah, 2018.
And of course that was Replogle Bergstresser
Yeah.
On the north side of the square.
Yeah.
And you primarily you did a lot of estate work, didn't you?
Did when
Ken
you're
had been doing a lot of estate
yeah
work.
yeah when you're in Marshfield, you kind of have to do a little bit of everything, and we we had Ben and then some other attorneys as well, John Terrell and Joe Robertson came aboard, and so we were when you're in a small community, you kind of have to do a little bit of everything. we were able to kind of divvy up the work a little bit. And so my practice was a lot of estate planning, estate administration, real estate, civil litigation, things like
Yeah.
that. And then I represented the city for 12 years, so
Yeah.
doing municipal law as well.
Sure. Yeah. Um, so in 18, I guess you probably got involved in the community. I know you were in Rotary Club.
Yep.
Um, probably other things, church and so forth.
Yep.
Anything there comes to mind that you want to speak about or talk about or anything?
Sure.
In the
Yeah.
community?
Yeah. Whenever I was practicing, got involved in some of the service organizations, like you mentioned, Rotary. But one of the organizations that I got involved with was the Marshfield Area Community Foundation, and Rob Foster at the time was the president of that, and he asked me if I wanted to be part of it, and it sounded like a pretty cool opportunity. So went on the board, and he was just insistent that he kept giving me assignments and things in that ultimately led to me being the president of that for a little bit, and so that's a terrific organization as far as raising money to help out the local nonprofits. And one of the ventures that came out of that was kind of convening some of the stakeholders in the community to try to improve I don't want to say the business climate, but just the growth and the development, the business development in Marshfield. And so we had spearheaded with some other people kind of an application for a grant program called Growth in the Rural Ozarks that was offered through the Community Foundation of the Ozarks. And we were awarded a grant that led to the development of Grow Marshfield, which again was just focusing on the development of Marshfield. And so got to serve with Grow Marshfield for several years, sitting on the board, serving as the president for a little bit of that. And that was a very meaningful experience for me. And so yeah, and as far as working with the church, we go to church at it's now called Kingdom Church. It was called Destiny Church for a while, but really working with them, and we had actually at Kingdom Church we had been affiliated with another church in Republic, Destiny Church, and I don't want to say we're a satellite church, but we were a second campus and under their umbrella, and we reached a point where we decided we wanted to kind of go out and kind of be our own church, and so worked with some people in our church to help kind of get that going and up and running as our own independent thing, and that was a pretty it was tough, but it was a special experience as well. So
speaking of churches, the what was Destiny, now Kingdom, and then along came the Well, another very successful church here in Marshfield. Those, my own terminology, kind of a new style church. They're more of they're not traditional like the old mainline Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, and so forth. They're a newer type of church. They've actually probably been extremely instrumental in bringing a lot of new people to church.
Yeah.
When you look at the programs that they've been involved in, and I know you guys even do the food pantry now.
Yeah.
Gosh, on a Friday morning or whatever it is, the cars are backed up to the spur, and you do a lot of work in that area, but these type of churches, it's not like it was when we grew up, and they're doing different things that are working to bring people in.
Yeah.
And probably, whether we like it or not, the old traditional churches, if they didn't move that direction, then they probably are going backwards. And I think it's important for the churches to continue to survive, that they have to adjust.
Yeah.
But don't give up the scriptures.
Oh,
don't give up the law.
No.
Don't remember who brought you to the dance, right?
Yeah, and I'd encourage anybody to come check us out. And Ryan Huff is our pastor, and he's just doing a phenomenal job. And he takes that obligation to understand the Word of God and make sure that he's being faithful to it. And when he takes the pulpit, it's God speaking through him, and necessarily what he wants to say,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so he's just doing a
Yeah.
fantastic job. And
Well, it's
it's
all
great.
good. It's
Yeah.
all good for sure.
Yeah.
So you moved right into the associate judgeship
Hmm.
in 2018.
Yep.
Let's go in. Let's go down that path.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little
So
bit.
I think, I'd always envisioned myself ultimately becoming a judge. I think that's an aspiration of a lot of attorneys. And Ken Thompson had been serving as associate circuit judge, and he was somebody that I just admired greatly. And there's a
Absolutely.
lot of people that admire
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
greatly. And so he was coming upon retirement age, and I kind of saw that as my opportunity. His seat was going to be coming open, and I decided to throw my hat in to be his successor. And Cynthia Black, who also threw her hat in as well, and we had a good race, a good campaign. And Webster County was very fortunate in that election because she's a fantastic attorney, and she would have made. I guess I need to say this carefully because of what's going on now. I said she would have made an excellent judge. And so, and I was really proud of the race that we ran because politics can get pretty nasty
They sure
nowadays,
can.
and certainly
Yeah.
we did not do any of that.
Right.
And I think we had a lot of respect for each other,
Yeah.
and so I was fortunate enough to win that race, and now Webster County's blessed because of my uh, move recently to the circuit bench has opened up the associate circuit spot, and Cynthia was
Right.
appointed to fill that spot, and we're excited to have her. She's going to do a fantastic job.
Along with Associate Judge Evans, Justin
Yeah.
Evans,
Yeah.
another Marshfield boy.
Yeah.
I can still use that term because
Yeah.
I'm went to school with his mother. So,
Yeah, there you go.
it is going to be a great period
Yeah.
in the courthouse for Marshfield and Webster County, and we're certainly excited to see all of you work together to do what you have to do to make us the best community possible.
Yeah.
And I know in this day and age, it's probably more difficult every year to keep your arms around all that. It seems like the numbers just keep going up as far as numbers of cases, and I suppose that's still right, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it's yes, it's there's a whole bunch of cases getting
Yeah.
filed right now, and lots of criminal stuff and lots of civil stuff. And we're a litigious society now, but
it's really sad, but it's where we are today in today's times.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the drug court, because I know
Yeah.
that's kind of been your baby, so to speak. You've been very instrumental, and I think it just completed its 20th year, right?
20th year.
Started maybe under Ken Thompson.
It did. Ken Thompson and Brad Stocker were the kind of the people who really brought this to Webster County. And when you get involved in the criminal justice system, what you'll notice is you see a lot of the same people kind of rotating through repeatedly, and maybe they're convicted and sentenced to prison, and you're a little surprised sometimes how little of their prison sentence they have to serve before they're released on parole, and then they're back in the community. And next thing you know, they've got another drug crime that they're in front of you for, and so there began a movement for treatment courts, and the thought is if we can use the criminal justice system to leverage accountability over people to make sure that they address their drug addiction, get the treatment that they need, and maybe if we can break the addiction and transform the life, that maybe we can stop that cycle of crime that's happening. And so back in 2004, Judge Thompson had the foresight to see that as a good opportunity for Webster County. And at the time, it may not have been a vision that a lot of people necessarily agreed with. It not maybe not appearing tough on crime is maybe the best way to put it, but he had the foresight to see that this was probably a pretty good thing. And I know he went to Brad Stocker, and Brad agreed, And so they got that program up and started back in October of 2024, and so Judge Thompson ran that program
Now, wait a minute. What year was it?
2004. What I say?
24. So yeah,
2004.
2004.
Yeah,
Just for the record.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So
2004.
20 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and Judge Thompson ran that program for 14 years before he handed it over to me. And so in 2018, uh, whenever I was elected to the position, my race with Cynthia was in the primary, and there was no Democratic opponent, so the result was known after the August primary, and Judge Thompson had invited me to become part of the drug court team, so I could watch him do it for a few months
Right.
before I took over, and that was incredibly valuable, but probably not, in the sense that I was not a believer in drug court at that time. I had this sense that it's maybe seemed soft on crime, and so I wasn't a real big believer, but that's what I signed up to do. That was part of the responsibilities. I'll do it. But watching him interact with the participants and watching the transformation in their life, I very quickly became a big believer
Yeah.
in treatment courts, and so we took that over in starting in 2019 when my first term began, and it was my favorite thing to do as a judge.
That's
to
great.
to see people
Yeah.
that are struggling and working very hard to put their life back together and being able to celebrate it.
Yes.
And then it's about if it's not uniform in how long it takes. It depends upon the how well the person is doing in the program, but generally takes about a year and a half to 2 years to complete it. And whenever somebody does complete the program, we have a graduation ceremony and a big family celebration. So it has been very, very fulfilling to preside over that. And
Right.
Unfortunately, because of my new assignments amongst over 4 counties instead of one, I'm not going to have the time to continue doing drug court, but Cynthia,
Yeah.
Judge Black, will
Yeah.
be my successor.
She'll be great
She's
because I
gonna,
know she's had a real heart in that as well over the years.
yeah, she does. In fact, she was part of the original
Right,
team
yeah.
to put it together, and so
Yeah, that's good.
she's going to do a fantastic job.
That's interesting because I probably would have been about where you were on that initially, and then when I got into the legislature in 2011, I realized it really quick. I think, and these numbers may be off today, but about 80% of all of the people in prison in Missouri are somehow connected to some drug crime.
Yeah.
Whether it's, they may be in there for murder, but it was because of drugs,
Right.
or it may be for drugs, or it may be, what we might consider today kind of a petty marijuana, conviction or something that
Yeah.
was done many, many years ago when a nickel bag would get you in prison or something.
Yeah.
But the point is 80%. And the prisons, as everyone probably knows, are just full all the time.
Yeah.
And, we've got a brand new jail here that's houses 110 or 20 people, and coming from an old building that housed initially a dozen, maybe they squeezed 30 or 40 in there.
Yeah.
And I guess the new jail's full again.
Yeah.
So, it's just a terrible tragedy that's where we are in society. But what I learned up there in the time that I spent, and then even over the medical marijuana program after, is some of these people, it's easy for us. I've been blessed with great health, been blessed with no addiction issues or anything my whole life. But, some of these people they just can't help it, whether it was inherent or whether they learned it because of terrible decisions they made early in life. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, we need to help these people. They're not all bad people.
Right.
Some of them are, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And probably most of them that you deal with in drug court are in that classification as not being bad people.
Yeah,
they need a hand up and not a hand,
yeah,
kick in the tail. So.
Yeah, they're good people, and one of the challenges in drug court for somebody that's new to it is convincing them that they're good people. And
Yeah.
if you can convince them that they're good people
Yeah.
and that they're able to change,
Sure.
then that's whenever the magic really happens. And so, and you know, another thing too, Lyndall, is I think something that it's important for the public to know about is just the economic benefit of the treatment court program. Because if you can get somebody that transforms their life and breaks that cycle of addiction and crime, not only do we avoid the cost of repeated incarcerations, whether it be in prison or locally at the jail, you know, and all the costs associated with that, public defenders, probation officers, things like that. Not only do we minimize or reduce those expenses, but we're also making people productive again.
That's right.
We're taking people that maybe were unemployed, or maybe they're receiving welfare, but they're back and they're working and they've discovered the dignity of work,
Right.
and they're becoming taxpayers again, and you know, supporting children, and so it's just when somebody can break that cycle, it just really, it doesn't just benefit them, it benefits the community.
That's right. I don't want to get too personal with this, but I'm assuming it's okay to talk about one because you guys put his picture in the paper when he went through court. But Jeff out at Crosscut Lumber, I don't know if you remember Jeff.
Yeah.
You talk about a success story.
Yeah.
And I don't really know Jeff, but I can tell you this: when you go out there today, that lumber yard back there is immaculate.
Yeah.
And it's because of Jeff.
Yep.
Because before he was there, it wasn't, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. And he waits on you and helps you load your lumber or whatever. And
yeah.
That I know that's a success story.
Yeah.
I know it is.
Yeah, he's a fantastic guy, and he's not only one of the nicest drug court participants we ever had. He's one of the nicest guys ever had. I mean, he's a big giant guy.
Yeah,
and, it can be a little bit intimidating, but he's a teddy bear. And,
yeah. I didn't know he was in drug. I mean, I got acquainted with him out there, and then I read the paper and saw an article or something that he had been in the drug court.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
You know, and it's interesting too, because we've had some local businesses that have really been willing to accept some of our participants in employment, and we had some we had working is important. It was always important to me as a drug court judge, because I mentioned the dignity of work, because work is more than just a paycheck. It puts you around positive people. It helps build your confidence. It fills idle time. And so if you are physically capable of working, when you come into drug court, you're probably going to have to work. And if you don't get a job after a while, we're going to make you start doing community service. And so you might as well you're going to have to work one way or the other. It's a question of whether you're going to get paid for it.
Yeah.
But we had one fellow that we brought in who he had been notorious participant in the Webster County criminal justice system for years and years and years and years, all drug related. And when he came, he was very eaten up with drugs, and we were not certain that he was going to be able to work, but he wanted to change, and he, boy did he.
Yeah.
And he was a good worker, and in fact he worked his way up. He's a supervisor at one of the local plants here in
that's
town.
awesome.
And so
that's great.
So yeah, great story.
It is. And I think, again, you guys 20 years now, and they do a nice job with having a celebration, and usually the paper covers it and all that. But it's something that could even be advertised even more if we talk about it and make sure that we show the appreciation to those people, and certainly to all of you that helped to get them through it. What do you think the actual success rate is? Any idea? Is that, I know at one time it was like 50-50, which it would be hard. There's going to be some that are going to fall off, and they're going to go back. And I just was curious if that was still.
It's going to generally be around that number. I mean, you would love to see it be 100%.
Sure.
Or higher than 50, but some people come in, trying to not go to prison, and that's their motivation. And they just never really are interested in changing, and usually we can identify those people pretty early in the program, and they end up generally not completing the program and end up having to go to prison. But yeah, it's probably around that 50%.
Well, I know many that have been through it and are successful still today, and some of those folks from many years ago. Well, that's great. So now, what happened this week? Big news. I'm sure I had a little post on Facebook myself Friday evening. I wanted to make sure folks, or Thursday evening, I guess, knew about. Of course, with you coming on my show, I wanted to give that background, and then with Cynthia as well. But why don't you kind of tell us what took place?
Yeah. So Michael Hendrickson had served as our circuit judge for 12 years and did a great job. And back towards the beginning of the year, he had decided that he was going to not run again, that he was going to retire or try something different. And so I thought, that's something that I felt God kind of pulling me in that direction. So I threw my hat in for the circuit judge position, and nobody else entered into it.
Yeah.
And so
That's that's a testament right there,
thank you.
Chuck. You know, it really is. So, to not have an opponent.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it made for a better summer for sure.
It sure did.
But the 30th Circuit is comprised of Webster County, Dallas County, Polk County, and Hickory County. And the thought of having to run a contested race
Yeah.
over those four counties was pretty intimidating.
Uh-huh.
So I'm on the ballot, uncontested, and about a month ago, Judge Hendrickson had come into my office, and he had a very good opportunity present itself to him, and it was something that he was wanting to go ahead and jump at. And so he told me that he was going to end up retiring slightly earlier than he had expected. Instead of finishing out his term, that he was going to go ahead and retire on October 31st. That meant that there was 2 months left on his term, and somebody needed to fill it out. Well, you're not going to find anybody else willing to give up their job to serve 2 months as circuit judge. So I was really the only person that made sense for the governor to appoint. So
Yeah.
the governor appointed me to fill that position for the last 2 months of the year, and then next year I'll start my elected term. And so yeah, so yesterday was my first day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's a neat story, and I hadn't heard that the judge had another position, so that's news, but that's good.
Yeah,
it's good for him.
Yeah, he's at a firm in Springfield. He's really excited to do that.
Good,
So,
good. That's great. And then of course that left your spot, associate circuit judge, available. So to keep, as I mentioned on Facebook, to keep the trains running on time, to keep everything flowing rather than wait and have a 2 month delay or whatever in both of those positions, the governor went ahead and appointed Cynthia Black to take your associate judgeship, and that will be for a 2-year term, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Till your other term expires.
Yep.
So that's how I know Ken Thompson came in that way, back in the 01, and others have in other positions. So that's not uncommon at all to fill an unexpired term.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, and she was sworn in on the same day that I was, and so she has the unenviable task of trying to shut down her cases. But she's hired a young attorney, Bailey Adam McMoffitt, John Adamick's daughter,
Right.
And Bailey looks like she's going to be a fine attorney.
Yes.
Very sharp, articulate young lady, and we're excited to have her, and I think she's going to take over a lot of Cynthia's Judge Black's cases.
Right.
And so yeah, we're excited about that.
Good deal. So what do you think, what's in the future for the Honorable Chuck Replogle? What do you see down the road? I mean, what are you, if you don't mind, you're 50?
I'm 48.
You're 48, okay.
Yeah.
So you're not quite 50 yet.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got 22 years you can serve until the mandatory retirement in Missouri is 70.
Yeah.
Under the program we have.
Yeah.
So I suppose you see yourself probably in that position 22 years.
Very much.
Or is there a higher political, like attorney general or something, that you would see down the road?
Well, there are other opportunities, and I am very, very happy to be where I'm at right now. And I could very much foresee myself being in this position as long as the people will have me.
Right.
I would never say that I wouldn't do something. But as of right now,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
where I'm at. This is where I'm excited to
Good,
be, and,
good.
and we'll see what the future holds.
Absolutely. Well, that's great, and that's what you should be doing. Um, Politically speaking, and not necessarily just for you, but I thought we'd kind of end. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, and I thought we'd just talk for just a moment about kind of the climate of politics today. You and I have visited about politics in the past a little bit, and we're both obviously the same party, and probably think a lot alike in many ways, and on policy issues. But it seems like we're going through a pretty major change, even in our party. The period, pretty much since Trump was elected in 16. Because you got to go back to W. Bush. He went out in 8. So, Donald Trump's been the only Republican president we've had since Bush went out at the end of '08. And that's 16 years. We've just had the 4 years with Trump. And when you look at his style and his way of leading, it's different. It's different than W. Bush or G.W. Bush or even Ronald Reagan or Nixon or Eisenhower. In the modern era here, the era that at least I can remember, but some of. What do you see? I mean, do you see? It seems like we're much more divisive today. We have, if you're going to be a Democrat, you got to be way over here. If you're going to be a Republican, you got to be way over here. And whereas when you go back in those eras that we talked about, it really wasn't like that. They all had differences in their policy, but the style is different.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's unfortunate to see how divisive the times have become. It really would be nice to go back to an age where you can have debates over policy and with people that you respect and are good people, and you can agree to disagree on some stuff. And so it's unfortunate to see people that will just attack who you are as a person because you don't agree with everything that they agree about. And so it's unfortunate. You'd like to see some civility come back into the equation, but and then the other thing too is obviously my job doesn't entail this, but it really would be. It just seems like everybody feels like if you don't get 100% of what you're wanting, then you can't have it. And
Yeah.
that's not really how good governance works.
Right.
And so there's obviously give and take whenever you have people that have, assign different values to different
Right.
things. And so it would be nice to be able to get back to a time where policy proposals can be negotiated and compromised a little bit so that everybody can walk away with a little bit of a good feeling about it. And hopefully we'll get back there someday. I think it would be nice to see, legislatures that can get things done. So we haven't had a real productive legislature recently.
We haven't, and for that very reason, because and unfortunately, I'll just tell you, it's because of our side of the aisle. There's certain members that just it's got to be my way or the highway, and I think it's unfortunate that it's come to that, and so I hope that people will be more reasonable and will listen to both sides of an issue, and as you mentioned, and we can get some things done. I didn't want to get into any specifics with election Tuesday, but Tuesday is a very big day, and there's some things, amendments that are out there that, again, I'm not going to put you on the spot at all. And some of those amendments, it's pretty much an opinion of whether you think we ought to have legalized gambling and things like that, and that's fine. You can feel however you want to. Even Amendment 3, the amendment that everyone's talking about. Do your homework, do your research, vote your heart, and pray about it. But there is one amendment that hasn't been talked a lot, and I thought I would at least ask you to explain it because it involves the courts. And I know I'm going to give you my opinion, and I don't expect you to, but you're a judge. But I think it's Amendment 6, and it involves court fees that are going to be put on that have been in place since 1983. this is not a Republican or Democrat issue or anything like that. So that's why I want to talk about it. I just want to make sure people understand it, because that that was put in place by the Missouri legislature in 1983 as a fee, and I don't remember if it was initially $3. It probably wasn't. I think this new amendments, they're asking for $3 to be put back on the on your court costs, as people that do the crime pay for help to fund the sheriff and the deputy retirement fund. And that was set up in 1983 because they had no way of funding those funds. Now, some would say, well, just do it through the general revenue. Well, again, to me, it's a pay to play deal. If you're going to do the crime, you pay $3 for your additional court costs, which was in place for 40 years until the Supreme Court ruled and said that it wasn't constitutional. Mm-hmm. What this amendment's going to do, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually going to put it in the Constitution, so it is constitutional to be able to charge that $3 fee. Right. And I know Sheriff Cole, if he were here, he would tell you we desperately need this fee. They need it for the deputy funds. Again, it's not going to cost the taxpayers that don't do any wrong, don't do any crime, won't cost you a penny. So I'm going to ask that you vote for that Amendment 6, because it hasn't been talked about a lot. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm voting no on everything, or something like that. That's one I'd like to ask that you vote for. Any comments on that?
Well, like you said, a couple of years ago, the Missouri Supreme Court declared that provision unconstitutional, mm-hmm. and what it resulted in was court costs being $3 less than normal. And so, for example, at the Seymour Municipal Court where I was, court costs went from $32 down to $29. Mm-hmm. And that was a big blow to the solvency of the pension program, right, for the sheriff's retirement system. And so, like you mentioned, if you vote yes for that, you're just basically agreeing to allow $3 to be put back on those court, yeah, costs, so that the participants in the program are helping to fund that pension fund. And there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of criminal cases get filed across Missouri every single year, and that's a lot of money to, right, help fund that program. So yeah, it's yeah.
So if you don't vote, if that doesn't pass, there probably will have to be some other funding found for that pension fund. We owe it to those sheriffs. I think there's something like 75 sheriffs that are drawing a pension that are retired now, and that fund will be in trouble. So I hope people would support at least that one amendment for sure. The rest of them, again, vote your heart, and most of you have probably done a lot of homework and studying on many of them. So with that, I think we're just about to wrap up here. It's 1 minute till 2:00.
Let me say one more thing. I left out my youngest. I didn't get to talk about her. Emily's my youngest. She's a fantastic kid, and she's just starting high school and just starting to kind of grow into who she's going to be. And she's a very serious student. She takes her academics very seriously, and we're super proud of her. And she's one that I've been trying to encourage her to go into law, and she's not quite interested in it. She's interested in a lot of things. She likes music, but she's also interested in law enforcement. And but she's a fantastic kid, and she's got a super bright future. And she'll be turning 16 next year. So
awesome.
We'll see how.
I'm glad you did it. And you need to talk a little bit more about Tiffany too. You mention, I know she's got quite a job over at the school, and I've been the recipient of some of her students' work over there.
Yeah, she's a fax teacher at the high school and just does a great job. And
you want to tell people what fax is, because I wouldn't know. But
Family and Consumer Science is what that stands for.
Used to be home ec, right?
Used to be home ec, and they've got a Family and Consumer Science program at the high school. And Tiffany teaches a lot of relationships classes, design, some sewing things. She used to teach some of the cooking things, but doesn't do that anymore. But here the school started a program where they're really starting to encourage and train students to move towards a teaching career. And so she's teaching some of those classes and helping with some of those clubs.
I think there's even a scholarship set up for that, for students
Yeah.
that want to be teachers
Right.
through
And
the school foundation that I'm a board member of. So,
yeah, and
yeah.
so she's got a lot on her plate. She works like crazy, but she's really passionate about her students, and her students love her. She does a great job, and so she's doing really good things over
Awesome.
there at the school.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's about it. Thank you all for joining us again today. Again, congratulations to Judge Chuck Replogle, Judge Cynthia Black. We'll be very proud to have them taking care of the law cases, making judgments, and taking care of the courthouse for us here in Webster County. With that, Chuck, thanks.
Nope. Thank you,
Yep,
Lyndall.
we'll
Appreciate
see
it.
you. See you again soon.
Yep. Well, that's pretty neat. That so that went live, huh?
It went live, and I'll tell you what.